Hey guys, and welcome to the Week 1 Mod Extended Experience. In this playthrough, we survived the first week and the nukes, and we saw the progression of the apocalypse under the direction of the Week 1 mod and the ever-evolving banditry that ensued. In this video, we will follow Gerardo Coleman's quest for survival, his life in the quarantine zone, and the battle for the Crossroads Mall, as well as his interactions with the various bandit clans. Now, we didn't start recording locally until about 80 days in, so until then, unfortunately, we will be experiencing things in 720p. But that's alright, let's just get on with it. As we get started here, I should mention the important sandbox settings and mods, besides Week 1. We are running 16x population, insanely rare loot, and the Wandering Zombies mod with 2% sprinters. And last but not least, we used Pillow's random spawns, which decided to drop us off in Louisville. And one other thing to mention, as the footage is ripped from the streams, I'm unable to split the audio, so I might let the stream do the talking in a few places. But also, if you're interested in going back and watching the live, unedited footage, I'll leave the playlist linked in the description. Now, the first few days were fairly random, and since we hadn't been to Louisville in a while, we kinda spent that time just wandering around and taking in the sights, getting gas, and visiting the mysterious Finnegan Research Building. A place that always seemed to have secrets. Now, our first real priority would be to find a basement in order to ride out the nukes, but come to find out, there are no basements in Louisville. So for the second day, we did what everyone else does right before the apocalypse, and we went shopping. And we made sure to visit the bookstore and the hunting supply store. Unfortunately, there wasn't any bulletproof vests, but they did have tents and sleeping bags and ammunition. And then, like any red-blooded male, I got shopping fatigue faster than you get muscle fatigue swinging the sledgehammer. And then for the next 2 days, we were all over the place, but there wasn't any basements. So we decided to head out to the boonies. Basements or not, we were counting on the fact that those places weren't large enough or important enough to get plastered by 1,000-pound bombs and tactical nuclear warheads. And on day 5, we found our place. So we dropped off our things and went out in search of loot. And by then, things had started to happen. The first zombies showed up. So we hung around for a little while, indulging our voyeuristic interest in watching the collapse of civilization, but before the night was over, we returned to the boonies.
Oh no.
And beneath the sounds of air raid sirens and the chaos of bandits and zombies, me and a ragtag group of survivors made our preparations.
Shoot him! Bro, what the fuck are you doing?
As always, the best defense against bandits is vehicles, but the ragtag group of survivors I was with should be given credit here for making short work of most of our attackers. And as with any Week 1 run, much of your most important loot comes from bandits or fellow survivors, so as people started to die, I started to acquire more and better loot. And then as night began to fall, of course, things only intensified, and the house would get bombed and fires would break out, but at some point, Fred and I retired to the basement to ride out the storm.
Everybody inside!
The only problem was that Fred got stir crazy. And against my protests, he decided to go topside.
He's gone. He's a goner.
I like to think that he gave his life to make sure our shelter remained secure, and when I finally came up for air, he was gone, of course, but there were other survivors.
I don't think it stopped dropping yet.
Anyway, the worst of it was over, so I decided to survey the damage and find the boundaries of the fallout zone, which I did on the 16th of July when the ash had begun to fall. As far as I saw, there was a fallout line cutting through the southern edge of Louisville, but it did not reach the hospital, let alone the quarantine zone. Anyway, I spent that night in a random house on the road, but the next day I was able to get back to the boonies with fresh supplies. And things would be fairly quiet out there, but it didn't take long for the first wave of bandits to attack my home. Unfortunately, they ignored my warnings, so I was forced to shoot them.
That motherfucker.
And then over the next few days, I amassed more supplies and beefed up the boonies bunker, and I even lent a hand to the local authorities. But after living there a few days, I have to say that Gerardo Coleman had greater aspirations than just surviving. So we packed our things and headed to the quarantine zone where we thought we would find some action.
And I'm getting shot already. What the fuck? Who's shooting me?
Of course, we were surprised to find there wasn't very many zombies there, and in fact, there was quite a large number of army guys. And there was a few hostile bandits, of course, which we learned when they shot us. But suffice it to say, the quarantine zone of all places was actually kind of safe.
I can't believe they let that person in the army, if I'm being honest.
After getting shot, though, my mission became to get access to St. Peregrine's Hospital.
You're not surviving from that, buddy.
I needed supplies, sure, especially suture needles, and I thought they would definitely have those there. So on the 20th, we were out clearing Zeds with the aid of other survivors in the area, when I thought to myself, if I could just get my hand on a fresh set of keys for one of the cars in the lot here, things would move along a lot more quickly. And eventually we did get those keys, and things were going pretty good for quite a while until the car finally stalled on us. So we were once again a puny little pedestrian who was not very good at killing Zeds yet. That is, until we found another car, and the Zed slaying was back on for a while.
Yeah, it is really satisfying the way it sounds when they fucking get ran over. I'm not gonna lie.
But there's only so much time in a day, so once it got dark, we headed back home. And then the next day, I decided to take advantage of life in the quarantine zone and spent my time gathering up ammunition before heading back out to the front lines of the hospital. There I cleared Zeds and random bandits alike, and everything was going really well, until some random jerk-off decided to show up and shoot me in the face.
Except they're good when You gotta be kidding me.
And now the need for suture needles was even stronger than before. And the thing was that I could put band-aids on my wounds, but they wouldn't really heal until I could stitch them up. And now I had 3 wounds that needed stitching.
There's some bad guys in the fence line.
Anyway, the next day would demonstrate the wisdom of living in the quarantine zone.
Shit.
I would get drawn outside by the sound of bandits, and then chased off when the bandits pointed their guns at me, but it was the army who would kill them, and in the process they even killed a CDC guy. And as everybody knows, the CDC guys are some of the most deadly bandits of
I'm
all.
really afraid of getting friendly fired by these NPCs too.
And that's pretty much how things would go for the majority of my time there. Whenever threats got inside the fence, they were usually handled pretty quickly by the army. And then not only that, whenever bandits or army guys died, they usually had great loot. Anyway, on the 23rd, I decided to get more aggressive with the staff outside of St. Peregrine's Hospital. But my aggression was matched. And though I did get inside the hospital, things were still too hot. Even after spending
there's a
most of
fucking
the day
sprinter.
clearing Zeds and ruining another beautiful truck in the process. It was just one of those things where you kill a lot of Zeds, but even more show up, and it feels like somehow you aren't making any progress.
I'm going to be your fucking end!
But on the bright side of things, I did return to base to find even more dead CDC guys. It just really can't be overstated how much work the army put in while I was living there. And even though they had this annoying habit of breaking down my barricades, it was worth it in the end.
Oh yeah.
And that annoying habit actually helped me level up my welding skill.
Oh look, they tuckered themselves out.
Anyway, the next couple of days I spent in the industrial park looting what I could, and then I went up to the elementary school in
Oh
the
my
hopes of
God.
finding books.
That guy's scared the poop out of me. Oh, come on, dude.
That hope was cut short when the nuke happened to cut the school in half.
Hey, hey.
So we settled on looting
Hey,
some
buddy.
homes. And while literature wasn't really to be found there, we did at least come away with
Gonna
some
be
Girl
more of you
Scout
now.
cookies. And then for the 26th, we tried the hospital again with the aid of this fan here, and we would get inside, but it was pretty spooky, so we only raided the kitchen before getting creeped out enough to leave. And by this point, getting inside the hospital was no longer such a big deal, because by then we had found suture needles on dead bandits. But speaking of bandits, it was on the
welcome.
28th that I would get slapped up by a camouflaged bandit who I thought was an army cube.
I'm reloading here.
What the fuck?
That experience was the sort of thing that makes you want to shoot first and ask questions later, but at a minimum, it's just generally a good idea to keep your distance from any other survivors, at least until you're certain about who they are. But for now, my wounds were taken care of and things were getting more dangerous out here, so I decided it was time to start putting up some walls. Then, on the 29th, if for nothing else other than completing what I started, I went to work on the hospital again. And on the 30th, I started clear-cutting the forest. On the 31st, I dealt with some sketchy
they're getting
goons
killed.
escaped from the local corrections facility.
Oh, oh, there's several of them. I need to help the army. I need to help the army. I'm here. Oh, he got back up. Yeah, how about the coup de grace, bitch? Woo!
And I put up a fence trap near the hospital, which wouldn't get all too much attention, but I did make it to the upper levels of the hospital, which is always dangerous no matter how much it's been cleared. Then on the 1st of August, the army continued to wreck my barricades, while I continued to wreck the forest.
Bro, stop.
Ah, shit! Let's break in!
On the 2nd, I put up some more walls for the base, and I did some residential looting for once. On the 3rd, some psychopaths showed up and dwindled the army's numbers even further. And then on the 4th, I decided for some reason it would be a good idea to take a bath. Spoiler alert, it was not a good idea. Wet clothes plus nuclear winter equals nasty cold. And long story short, I had that nasty cold for a few days until I found a fireplace to burn it out. But in those few days, I would also get running water at the trailer. And I suppose I might as well mention it here, but with bandits, the struggles for certain significant survival needs is usually made easier. Say, like, if you don't have a pipe wrench at some point, a bandit will probably bring one to you. Same with ammo, food, weapons, other tools, meds, and even gas. And so it was that not even a month in, I had the luxuries of both electricity and running water. And that without having spent very much time looting or focusing on my skills. But at this point, I felt like I needed a new challenge. The quarantine zone wasn't what I had expected. It was safe. And the hospital wasn't as overran as I expected either. So I was beginning to get comfortable in the quarantine zone. That, and I also needed literature. What few books I had already read. So, in that spirit, I began branching out.
Level 3 aiming, by the way.
On the 10th, I hit the warehouse south of the quarantine zone, which turned into an experience that demonstrates the difficulties of exploring new territory with the ever-present danger of bandits. The most dangerous part of it really is, oddly enough, is that the Zeds and the bandits tend to cooperate. A tendency that became a recurring theme for this playthrough.
That's kind of why I like the nuke also, because, you know, half the world gets bombed. Bro, I wish they would just kill him. Please. There you go. You guys are not on the same team.
Anyway, friendlies would continue to wreck my barricades, and bandits caught inside the QZ would continue to get roasted by the army, and I did continue my fruitless search for literature in new locations, while of course continuing to be assaulted by bandits almost constantly.
No.
But eventually my thirst for knowledge and
Wait,
experience
he's looting.
led me to this closed off Louisville neighborhood where I made an interesting discovery.
Alright. You better not have picked up my sledgehammer, bro.
The citizens and the residents of that neighborhood had all perished, but without turning into Zeds.
There's like a ton of dead people here.
One theory was that the radiation had killed them, seeing as this neighborhood was close to the fallout zone. But having seen this same situation elsewhere, far from nuclear blast
Now they're
zones,
coming.
the second theory is that these people were liquidated
another
by the
sprinter.
government. But the truth is, we just really don't know.
Sprinter.
But either way, this neighborhood turned out to be a bust, so let's get out of here.
Oh my god. He's crawling under the Greens van. Leave him alone.
Now, on the 13th, I finally headed further south and got my first real sense that Knox County was
Look at him.
overran with
There's a lot.
Zeds.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
In the quarantine zone, things had been peaceful, and there were bandits, but there wasn't
If
Zeds.
this was on the road, it would be impassable, dude.
My expectations for the quarantine zone and even the hospital hadn't been met. I thought those places were overrun. But down south, yeah, they were bad. So I spent the day out there, more or less setting up my next grand adventure, which was to fight my way into the new pole position nightclub. It was a new location, and I'm nothing if not an explorer. Also, there was zombies, and plenty of them. So over the next couple of days, I would get started on clearing them out, relying heavily on vehicular Zed slaughter, but also putting up some fence traps. And then I would get the gas station apartment set up so I could spend less time commuting. But this was the beginning of the weeks-long siege for the pole position nightclub.
Like, I don't care if you gave me 20 points. I would never take it.
Oh, I gotta turn off respawn now that we're past peak. I have not got to do that yet.
This is not enough fence to deal with this. first. They're coming. Wow. We've not really thinned things out, have we?
Don't fuck with me!
Now, about this time, I had also done my first reconnaissance of both West Point and the Crossroads Mall.
Oh, no.
It turned out that the nuclear line of West Point was pushed out pretty far from its boundaries, so West Point was a no-go zone, and the Crossroads Mall was, as expected, completely overran by Zeds.
Oh, there it is. The Crossroads Mall. Jesus fucking Christ. What is going on?
Now, on the 21st of August, I had an encounter with some bizarro world cultists.
This guy, is that an umbrella or a sword?
Where I scored some pretty
Carrying
important loot,
umbrellas.
including metal neck guards and katanas. But most importantly of all, the Horns of Power.
That guy has antlers.
These would see me safely through many difficult and dangerous times. Then on the 26th, I leveled up tailoring to level 2 and became a katana-wielding samurai.
Yo, I'm a ninja.
You could probably say at this point, Gerardo Coleman was approaching final form. He had the Horns of Power, the Sword of Power, and also the Mask of Power. With these powerful artifacts, he would be nearly indestructible. That is, while all three remained on his person. But speaking of immense power, the next day we hit Mechanics level 2, which meant that all the vehicles laying around were now deadly weapons in Gerardo's arsenal. And now that all these gains were made, it was time for a victory lap. And where better than the parking lot of St. Peregrine's Hospital, with a helicopter overhead to bear witness. Now, even though our work was really only just beginning, and we had barely caught a whiff of the bloodbath that would become the Crossroads Mall, in a way here, at this point in time, we felt like we had already won. And I have to say that these BMWs make great vehicular Zed slaughter rigs. In my opinion, sports cars are generally the best for running over Zeds. But victories are often short-lived in the apocalypse, and it wasn't long before I was reminded of my own mortality shortly after Gerardo Coleman managed to have some disagreement with an officer of the peace. As near as I can tell, the officer must have considered the act of siphoning gas as some sort of criminal conspiracy. Anyway, a fair amount of the montage footage from earlier actually transpired after this point, so we're just gonna skip ahead to actually looting the pole position nightclub.
Oh my god, is there really
And after
that
doing
many
that,
here?
I wandered over to the drag strip and wound up being in such close proximity to so many Zeds that I happened to power level both light-footed and sneaking kind of by accident. But no good deed goes unpunished, and as I was leaving, the blistering cold temperatures smacked me down with another bout of one of those annoying head colds, which I would solve in the same manner as before, but it would cost me the Suburban,
I'm kind of scared to go near that now.
which in turn led to the Ford work truck phase of the playthrough.
And speaking of gooners, I got a couple gooners with shotguns rolling up on me.
The main thing about this phase was that I wanted to siege the Crossroads
Holy
Mall.
crap.
And the situation was I was still dumb and I needed books.
Where's the army now?
And I was hemmed in to the north
Come
by
on,
the
army
Louisville
guys.
bomb line and to the south by the West Point bomb line.
Well, we're in a gooner crisis right now, and the army guys just decided to take a break.
And by now I had looted many
Don't you do
places
it.
in between, but they were mostly residential and didn't have much. I thought the mall of all places had to have books and loot of all kinds. So it was on the 8th of September that I finally decided on the location of a forward operating base, a spot in a clearing just due west of the mall. Now, it was actually a little closer than I would have liked, and that proximity would lead to issues in the future, but for the 8th I would begin setting up by day and sleeping at the gas station by night. Then on the 9th, I had the bright idea to shoot a gun near the Woodland Base in order to bring forward any Zeds lurking nearby. And as it turned out, there were quite a few Zeds lurking nearby, which would then be the beginning of the perpetual problem with corpse stink that plagued the Woodland Base. Then of course the base
Come on,
would
baby.
have another problem with bandit aggression too, but by the evening of the 10th, I would feel safe enough to sleep there. The problem with corpse stink though was already becoming a problem, and so was staying warm through those brutal nuclear winter nights.
This is slightly scuffed, but I can sleep here.
And then, despite having been able to sleep there the night before, I was ran off the following day by yet another Zed Bandit collaboration.
Oh, they got the shotguns. Oh. Oh no. Oh, that was so frightening. Holy shit.
Thankfully, I was still able to rely on the relative safety of the quarantine zone. But after spending a couple of days in the quarantine zone cleaning it up and shaving, I headed back to the Woodlands base with a generator. And after my brilliant idea of shooting a gun out there, I had the problem of all these ugly corpses littering the lawn. So I got to work doing something that I almost never do, burying them. That way, maybe I could live there without getting sick, right? Anyway, that was hard, sweaty work, and bandits pulled up later that night, so in my exhaustion, I headed back to the gas station.
I gotta go sleep at the gas station because I can't see and it's too hot, right? Whoa. And there's just random zombie hordes crossing the street in the middle of the night.
The next morning, fresh Zeds and fresh bandits would greet me at the Woodlands base, but
You fucking piece of shit.
have I mentioned that fence traps
No.
work well against Zeds and bandits? And when the next set of bandits showed up after that, I used the best bandit killer of all, vehicles.
Out of the vehicle now! Reloading.
probably goes without saying, but the bandits were making it complicated to build a base out here.
And they're fucking shooting my truck. Oh, I'm fucking pissed.
And then, before the night was over, yet another group would show up and run me off, as I wasn't too keen on fighting them in the dark. Anyway, it was on the 14th of August that I would finally get control of the Woodland Base. I spent the majority of that day luring Zeds into my fence trap and clearing them out. And by the end of it, I had a staircase, a couch, and a cozy fire. Then I got the second story put up, and some lighting. And once again, I was attacked by nighttime trespassers. But this time I didn't run, at least not entirely.
I can't see him. Oh, they're getting swarmed by zombies. I'm shooting fucking blind out here.
And now, one of the difficulties about living here, besides all the other ones, was the blistering cold. But I found that if I stood in the right spot within the cabin, it could benefit from the warmth of the fire. Although this particular spot wasn't the right one, as you can see. Anyway, the next day, you probably already know that there was more bandits. But, of course, that was the beauty of installing the second story. Bandits were now easier to deal with. And seeing as it was foggy as all hell outside, I decided to put my plans for the day on hold, and I headed back north.
What kind of guns do you guys
And I'm
have?
sure you probably already guessed this too, but there was road bandits. But unfortunately for them, I was already in the truck. So they were shit out of luck. And then at the gas station, there was a friendly survivor. And it had been a while since I'd seen a friendly face, so I asked him to join me. And then, unsurprisingly, for the third time that morning, another set of bandits showed up. So I sacrificed my new friend and got back in the truck. But you know what? Not only did he make for good bait, he even managed to survive.
Get him. He's got a badminton racket.
Now, it was already a busy morning, but Gerardo Coleman is never too busy to read elevating literature.
To get our mental back.
Anyway, back at the quarantine zone, it was business as usual. But I have to say the property was looking pretty clean, so I was feeling pretty good about having taken the trouble to organize the pigsty that it was becoming. It's usually about 1 or 2 months into a playthrough that I start to feel I'm so disorganized that I can't think straight. And so I have to clean up. Anyway, it wouldn't be a day ending in Y if the next morning I wasn't attacked by bandits first thing. They might have had a new stealth low crawl tactic, but I still had the high ground. And then later that afternoon, I did some shopping at the hunting lodge, scoring both furniture as well as guns and ammo. After that, I have to say the feng shui of the Woodland Base was now reaching unheard of heights. Not least of which because of these beautiful floodlights which aided me in my nighttime struggles with invaders. And just for the record, inside the cabin, the place to register the warmth of the fire was beside the leftish window here, as you can see. Anyway, now that I was halfway happy with the Woodland Base as a launching point, I could finally begin sieging the mall. But first, I would do a little reconnaissance, a 360-degree loop around the target, to see what we were working with. The idea was to take advantage of the environment and what it offered, namely an abundance of vehicles, which to me are less modes of transportation and more weapons to be used against my enemies. Of course, running over Zeds with vehicles is a completely perfect plan with absolutely no drawbacks and no dangers of any kind, except for maybe this one.
Woo! Oh my god. We just escaped death and we definitely shouldn't have.
But despite the near-death experience, the fight would continue to rage on, and then like the millionth set of bandits would bless me with yet another gunshot wound. And you might be thinking, surely that's enough action for one day, and for once you're right. So after recruiting this van for the Armada, we went back to base to tidy up and feast on some roadkill before turning in. Then the next day, I was going about my business, and I had decided to go loud with unsilenced guns, so I was drawing quite a crowd when once again bandits decided to show up and make things complicated. The thing about fighting Zeds and bandits at the same time really is that the Zeds only go after bandits half-heartedly, and the bandits only go after Zeds half-heartedly. The truth is that you're their real target, and they are more or less play fighting with each other until they can get close to you. So, instead of playing their game for once, I decided to play my own, and I gave everybody the slip. Then, I started a siren elsewhere and waited for the masses to assemble. And after they assembled, I went home to spend a gross amount of time figuring out how to concoct a Molotov cocktail using Build 42's broken crafting menu until it finally got too dark to be able to use it that night. But the next day I did use that cocktail, and I made sure that all of the Zeds would burn down around the fire truck because I didn't want them wandering off into the nearby buildings and burning down all the loot.
Once they catch on fire, they don't give a fuck. Wait. They're holding?
And then after that event, of course there would be more bandits, but caught out in the open against the Jeep, they were pretty much defenseless. And then later that night I made it into the strip mall's little bookstore, but it didn't have anything of importance. And if you haven't caught on by now, the next day was also a day ending in Y, so I would be treated to a fresh set of bandits rushing the base. A few Zeds would follow in their wake, but that's what the fence traps were for. And then that night, another Zed bandit collab would interrupt my plans again, but I'm happy to report that not all partnerships pan out in the end.
Mostly they're gonna shoot at me though. The zombies and the NPC bandits kind of cooperate against the player. Like these guys should be dead running through. Look at this guy. He's like running into zombies and he's not dead. But they like, the zombies fixate on you and so do the bandits, so they like don't fight each other that much if you're close enough. It's kind of like, you know, the mod isn't able to function perfectly yet because of the way it's programmed. The horde finally got him. Not that one though. Get him.
Now, with all the action that had been going down at the Woodlands base itself, I decided to fortify it further with even more fence traps, which in
deer
retrospect
alone.
was a wise move. Just build fence traps if you aren't already. Zeds
domesticate
and even
that thing.
bandits are actually pretty weak against obstacles.
Oh my god, look how many look, that's 6 bandits.
Anyway, that afternoon I witnessed
With
an even
shotguns.
more absurd collab between Zeds and bandits as they moved together through the woods as one unit. But speaking of obstacles, I'm pretty sure this bandit was trying to remove my tire, which made him an easy target. Now the rest of the day passed in relative peace, burying corpses and reloading magazines, but it was about this point in time that maintaining the Woodland Base was becoming overwhelming. I was essentially unable to even be there without getting queasy. So the next day I
guy
took a
thinks he's
break
slick.
and
Look
headed
at
back to the
Gonna start
quarantine
looting.
zone,
No?
where it was
gonna
also
run
a
up here?
day ending in
What
Y.
an animal.
And after that, I was reminded that
Is he
it
alone?
isn't only the hostile bandits with a death wish.
Come on, buddy. Get out of the way. No, don't run into the truck.
Anyway, I would goof off at the quarantine zone for a couple of days and then I jumped back into the siege at the mall. Obviously, there was still plenty of Zeds to be dealt with. Now, the next day after was a foggy one, so I was actually wary of combat, but I did happen to come up with an ingenious plan. I had used one siren before to burn about 500 Zeds, but I asked myself, what if I doubled the sirens to burn double the Zeds? That seemed like solid math to me. So after replacing the dead battery in the fire truck, I lured in more Zeds with the second siren of the police truck. And after letting the Zeds assemble around the 2 vehicles, I lit them on fire. And then, of course, I babysat them once again just to make sure that none of them wandered off into the nearby buildings. But after that, the rest of the night was spent lining up the armada for future use. Then the next day I continued sieging the mall, and as you can probably tell, even though 1,000 souls had perished in the double siren molly fire, there was still plenty more where the Zeds came from. So once my shift was over, it was time for a nightcap and to relax by the fire. Predictably, the 27th was another day ending in Y, so you already know how it started. Anyway, that day I began to use the Armada, and I actually made my first entrance into the mall itself, slight as that entrance was. And I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Sports cars really do make for great Zed runner-overs, even when they only have 3 wheels. Now, it was on the 28th that primitive bandits would be observed in the wild for the first time. They had pitched tents in the woods very near to my own, and I probably could have raided them while they slept, but I just didn't have the heart for it. But I would make up for that later when I spotted another tribe just off the road. This time, they weren't sleeping, and they attacked me first. So, I engaged. And primitive though they were, I was impressed by the quality of their bone and hide technology.
I almost just fucked up. I come in peace. No, stop. I will. Yeah, okay. Why does it always end like this?
Anyway, back at the quarantine zone, it wouldn't be a day ending in Y if I didn't get into some sort of showdown upon my arrival. So, get into a showdown I did.
Yo, I have not had them shoot at.
And then I happened to take one to the groin,
Oh my
And-
god, this is getting They got me in the groin.
and I realized that if I was going to kill this group of bandits outside the wire, all of them armed with rifles, I needed to be smart about it. So I upgraded to a gun with a larger scope and worked on them pretty carefully until they were all dead. Anyway, after a couple of days of mandatory R&R at the QZ, I headed back to post, with the Camaro this time, as the Ford was now suffering from found on road dead status. I guess you could say that things were situation normal, all fucked up. Like this situation here with some armed bandits.
What the fuck?
Yeah, situation normal, all right. I guess you could say that it was about this time we entered our limping all the time phase. And since that kind of hampers your ability to siege a Zed-infested environment, I headed back to the QZ once again, and I revived the old Ford. This was also about the time when the quarantine zone started really going downhill. The numbers of my army friends was dwindling, and hostile bandits were finding it easier and easier to get inside the wire and attack me at the trailer. And I was likewise finding it more difficult to come and go as I pleased. I guess you could say that while I was busy sieging the mall, bandits were busy sieging the quarantine zone, and tensions were mounting everywhere. So that night we listened to the wisdom of the Buddha, and we recentered ourselves. And we even took some time to get back to nature. That is, until our peace was broken by
right now.
an extension of our
he sees me.
limping all the time phase.
Oh, motherfucker.
Then the following day, after tussling with bandits yet again, I would once more have my already bullet-ridden feet get shot up even more. Things were not going my way, but at least I was still alive.
Oh my god, dude. Not a fucking again.
And I guess you could say that around this time I figured out the principle with stitches and limps. It seems that you can remove stitches after about 24 hours and your deep wounds turn into scratches. And if that's all it is, your limp seems to go away then or shortly after. Anyway, with all these wounds we were taking, it was once again time for some more mandatory R&R until we recovered. The following day I would have some trouble when I was heading back south after flipping the Ford and getting ambushed by bandits. I did get shot again, but at least it wasn't in the foot this time. And at this point, I have to say the bandits were beginning to annoy me. But I also have to say that I take a twisted sort of pleasure in watching them get betrayed by their Zed friends.
Oh, there's a sprinter on the case. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
After enjoying that spectacle, I spent the rest of the day playing with the mall Zeds, and later that evening, I would have the first of several experiences that made me think the primitives were actually
Don't swing on my
wizards.
Jeep with an axe, dude.
Although, in retrospect, I think their only magic
How are
trick
these guys
here
just spawning
was how
out of the
well they
fucking
blended in amongst the corpses.
ether.
And I say that, but this one definitely materialized out of
I don't know.
absolutely nowhere.
You're in the middle of something and both bandits and what the
That's it. I'm decided they are wizards. Anyway, the next morning I raided their camp, seeing as I figured they were all dead, but they hadn't left behind any loot. And at this
he's
point,
sleeping.
I'm not even going to bother complaining about the Zed bandit collaborations.
No.
Bandits are just Zeds with guns and loot. Or maybe more accurately, they're sprinters with guns and loot. Yeah.
Look, he's cooperating with the Zeds. He's like trying to get an opening while I'm shooting the Zeds. It's like orcs and wizards being on the same side.
Anyway, the following morning, I went to check out the other camp that had sprang up near me, and apparently I got too close, so I ran to my nearest fence trap. And as I've said before, fence traps work wonders against Zed and Bandit alike. But the fracas, of course, would devolve into a more generalized brawl with Zeds and more bandits, and even my three-legged truck.
I'm just kidding.
But eventually law and order would be restored to the Woodland Base,
Bro died.
although I'd have to spend the rest of that day digging graves and burying more corpses.
The worst part about fence traps is how bad the targeting is.
Now, despite all the Zed and Bandit craziness, we had actually made some degree of
And
progress
they're fucking
towards the
destroying
mall.
my place. You
So it stood to reason that perhaps the movie theater was safe to loot. And it was,
That's where I sleep.
at least relatively. And looting it happened to be good timing because weight loss was now becoming an issue. But the theater had remained pretty well stocked with plenty of fattening foods like chocolate and buttery
I
popcorn.
don't know if I believe this food is really fresh.
Then the next day, I decided to go loud again and draw the hordes into my fence traps. And most of the day was spent in that activity. But that night, I would once again have another run-in with the primitive wizard clan. And once again, I would limp away.
Oh, what the?
I have to say that those dudes were really something else.
Dude, back up. That guy just stabbed me.
What?
These primitive bandits are wizards. There was no one around me, and he just was on me. And now I'm limping. My favorite thing.
Anyway, the next day was actually something more of your standard combat day. Guns, vehicles, Zeds, you already know. But somehow, there was no bandits, or like what felt like the first time in a month. It was some sort of Thanksgiving Day miracle. And the day following happened to be more of the same, but I made it to the rooftop of the cinema, which was a beautiful vantage point in order to look
Frozen
down
in time.
on all the chaos that had transpired around the area. And the day after that seemed to bring a group of veterans into the mix, but I couldn't tell if they were friendly or not. So I opted for a shoot first and ask questions later approach with them. On October the 11th, I loaded up the stream to business as usual, getting creeped on by a fresh set of bandits. Now, before I had ended the previous stream, I did kill a set of bandits and I thought that I had got them all, but apparently I was wrong. And also apparently I am really not trigger happy enough. If I was, maybe I wouldn't have gotten bludgeoned with an axe as I did here. Anyways, if you can't tell by now, things are beginning to get a little bit iffy at the Woodlands base. Now, despite my best efforts and burying corpses and all, I have not been able to keep up with the corpse stink or the depression caused by it. Living in a graveyard, simply put, is getting to me. But I still haven't gained access to the mall, which is my primary purpose out here. So the plan for the day was to build a fence trap in the kill zone in order to aid me in my goal. But the benefits of that fence trap would come later, so let's move on to the next day when I would once again nearly die to bandits. So there I was, minding my own business. And suddenly, I was getting shot. They were here, the goon squad. But most troubling of all, they were actually firing on me at my elevated position on the second floor, which is something bandits don't usually do.
Oh, can I not wake up to getting shot? Holy fuck.
And I'm not gonna lie, this made me panic. So I jumped over the side, and in the process, I lost my goddamn horns of power. And to make matters worse, as I skirted the boundary of my camp, another separate bandit pulled up from the north, while the squad from the south continued shooting at me, knocking me over. And on top of everything else that was already going wrong, I was fully sick from the corpse stink graveyard effect. And then, to add insult to injury, Gerardo Coleman made the most embarrassing, weak, pissant anguish moan I have ever heard in my entire life when he fell over. Disgusting. Luckily, despite all the shooting, my bulletproof armors had absorbed the bullets. And, for once, my feet had not been targeted and I wasn't limping. But nevertheless, fighting back into my base would not be easy because I wouldn't be able to take the goon squad head on even terrain. They had 3 rifles and I only had the 1. So I skirted the combat zone for a minute looking for an opening, but then I thought better of it. I would just come back later, and by then, maybe things would have sorted themselves out if I was lucky. In the meantime, since I couldn't beat the bandits, I decided to take a fight that I could win instead. And I decided to fight the zombies at the mall with my fence trap, and of course with the aid of the many vehicles in my vehicle armada. Of course, with my lowish level carpentry, the fence trap was pretty quickly damaged and torn down. And then a fog rolled in, which would delay my return to base even longer until it had dissipated. But around midday, it did, and I headed back where I would join forces with the Zeds for once to overcome the bandits while harnessing the power of my Jeep 4x4. Now, we did, of course, once again take control of the Woodlands base, but the same problems with the corpse stink and the depression it caused, and a general wariness of bandits would remain. So I decided to leave the base for the evening and went over to my safe house at the gas station by the highway. There I spent the night drinking water from the toilet and reading in the bedroom. And though I was safe for the time being, one problem was still bothering me. I needed a fresh set of antlers. Anyway, with my problems mounting the way that they were, it was kind of time to make a move. So I began preparing to make a little second-story safe house inside of the movie theater, which at this point was mostly safe from zombies. So I put up a couple of doors and I broke down the hallway. It wasn't everything that I would need to do, but it was a start. And after that, I would of course spend some time skirmishing with the Zeds by the mall and freak myself out with this new bug that made me think I was drinking gas. But after all of that, I wound down the night venting my frustrations on the Zeds until it got so dark I couldn't see. And the following day, I improved the Woodlands base because honestly, I was still holding out hope that I might continue living there. And then I repaired the fence trap, as fence traps really do wonders against enemies of every kind. And then I headed back to the quarantine zone for a much needed change of pace, and perhaps more importantly, to put on that fresh pair of antlers. But the plan for the day of the 15th was to cross the event horizon. We were about 100 days in, and the ash had stopped falling weeks ago now, and then the bitter cold of nuclear winter had also stopped. So I was left with the question of whether or not the nuclear radiation was still there. So we drove to the edge of the bomb line and held our breath. As it turned out, the radiation was gone.
It's Fallout free.
But not only that, the bomb line was only like 2 blocks wide, which meant that Louisville
Wait, are you kidding me?
was largely still intact.
What happened here?
I really don't know how or why the bombs landed like this. I suspect it is a bug, but nonetheless, it was now time to explore Louisville.
Are you fucking kidding me? This whole time. It was like one screen length of being nuked.
And explore it we did, and what we found was that the Zed population was alive and well and fully 16x. So after that discovery, we headed back, but as we did, we happened to see a survivor.
No shot.
And then our stupid, foolish, good Samaritan reflex kicked in,
Get in,
and
dude.
we tried to get him into our van. But to be honest, it was probably curiosity more than anything that made me want to help him. He was, in fact, the first friendly survivor I had seen in quite a while. And then seeing him in the middle of a place I thought had been completely nuked meant I just couldn't resist interacting with him. Then, of course, he died to the Zeds, and then after that, my van ran out of gas. Everything was going wrong and escalating fast, the way things tend to do during the apocalypse. Then I happened to swing on a crawler while nearly getting rear-ended by a sprinter. Things went from 0 to full code red in about 10 seconds flat. But in all honesty, there wasn't really a need to panic. There might have been a lot of Zeds around, but Zeds are very stupid and easily outmaneuvered. And suffice it to say, I was actually able to escape and return to the relative safety of the meth trailer in the quarantine zone without too much of a hassle. But the next day, it was time to do something good for once and show some appreciation.
Bro, this is killing me. Whatever's causing this bug. He like does it faster while you're moving.
It was time to honor the fallen dead, the brave men and women who gave their lives defending the quarantine zone and whose sacrifice had allowed Gerardo Coleman a good 2 to 3 months of relative peace living there. And after the ceremonial booze was imbibed and the good Dr. Skylord had said a few words, these brave heroes were finally laid to rest. Then on the 17th, we'd once again head into Louisville to do reconnaissance on the LSU library, because books thus far have been very scarce, and they've kind of been my number one motivator as far as exploration goes. Now, we have been hoping to score books in the Crossroads Mall, but failing that, the LSU library, which is still standing and not nuked, is sure to have books. I mean, it has to. It's a very large library. And insanely rare loot or not, I'll be damned if I infiltrate the place and the only thing that I find is one singular tailoring level 3 book. Anyway, that being said, the area was completely overran with Zeds, and finding a location for a forward operating base was giving me some difficulty. That is, until we came across the little strip mall and motel area, which was relatively abandoned by the Zeds. Here we decided to loot the area briefly because it had a VHS store, And we did score a couple of VHS tapes in the process, and afterwards we returned to base to take care of some more important things. Now, before I could leave the following day, some bandits would show up and embroil us in a little bit of an awkward standoff, but after I finished them off, it was time to make the movie theater an actual base with sledgehammered stairs and escape ropes, you know, the full deal. And then I would sleep on the roof with a tent, but doing so was making me nervous. The fact is, the roof is so large that I have to worry about the possibility that bandits might spawn up there. But that's a problem for another day. And by another day, I mean like the next day. Because after spending most of the 19th fighting Zeds for access to the mall, I retired to my safe rooftop to get some sleep. Of course, I was then woken up in the middle of the night in total darkness to a magical wizard primitive bandit running at me.
Whoa, 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 whoa. They did spawn up here. Oh my god. At least I can play the door against him. I hate always being right about bullshit.
Fortunately, he was alone because the rest of his tribe
They're fighting each other. Oh my god.
had also spawned
Look at
up
this.
there with another bandit group, and they were fighting each other on the
It's
far end of the
magical
roof.
fucking bandits versus veteran types. Yeah, that does answer that. Whoa, are they knocking each other off the roof? Look, he's gonna make them walk the plank. And then I just come in and kill everybody. Wait, the primitive bandits, the primitive wizards are kind of... The primitive wizards are winning. Holy shit. He's letting them loot. Don't let them loot, bro. There you can pick up guns. Whoa, 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 whoa. They just disappeared and I got a bunch of errors. Oh, they're back. Yeah, and he's just gonna pull out a fucking rifle. Don't get up. Don't you do it.
In the end, somehow the primitives ended up winning, and then I finished off the remainder.
I think more spawned on the ground level and they're yelling.
And then, as I was looting them, I was troubled by some bandit from the ground floor shooting up at me. You just really are never truly safe with bandits in the game.
Did someone just take a shot at me up here? Bro, he's shooting at me from ground level on the roof. Holy. Or he's shooting me through the floor. Oh, we're breaking the game in a million fucking pieces right now.
Anyway, after running that bozo over, I'd get aggressive with a fresh BMW at the mall, which is really one of the better vehicles I've found when it comes to running over Zeds. Then, after doing that for a while, I would actually take my first steps inside of the mall. And I'd even clear out the West End entrance. We were finally getting somewhere. Or so I thought. Despite everything, the Zed presence inside the mall was anything but thinned out, which is a fact that would begin to make itself clear the following day, as I continued working my way through the mall. And now that I was actually getting inside, the bandits would become even more dangerous, as it's a simple matter of fact that they are generally easier to deal with in big open spaces as opposed to confined dark ones. And speaking of bandits, it would be that night that the first Mad Max Bandits showed up, and this is how that all went down.
What the fuck? This guy's got the metal armor. Fucking the Mad Max, and he had a sword? Oh my god. Ah! You bandage, you motherfucker. I have no more bullets.
The situation would ironically get somewhat complicated by my machete breaking and the fact that I had ran out of ammo. So I was forced to flee as far as my fence trap, which also works wonders against bandits, much the same as Zeds.
Man, this is getting fucking primeval out here. Medieval.
Oh, dude, the one-handed mace is so good.
I think there was 6 of them in all, and after dealing with them and their Zed companions, I made sure to refresh my weapons and ammo, because you really can't let yourself get caught out without ammo against bandits, or at least it's a very bad idea to do so. Anyway, after the day's events, it was, of course, time to journal into the map like a real Apocalypse Andy. I woke up on the 22nd of October in my movie theater base, and then I spent the day looting the bandits that had spawned on the roof and doing other base chores like getting started on the sky moat, which would turn out to be a good idea for the future, but for now it was just a major source of muscle strain. The type of muscle strain you have to pop pills in order to deal with. Anyway, other than putting down a rain collector, not much else would happen that night, but I would finally fall underweight. Anyway, I would get an early start the following day, but I would also have a little bit of a mix-up with a fresh set of Zeds who had launched themselves against the security windows on the western entrance of the mall. They would, of course, crash the game, which always makes me uncomfortable because you can still hear the Zeds moaning and moving while your screen is frozen, and you always have to wonder if you're gonna get bitten during the freeze time. But thankfully, that didn't happen, and of course the game creates a backup for you when it does crash, so you're relatively safe actually when the game does decide to crap out like this. The one relative downside though, is that when I had spawned in, all of those Zeds had been disappeared. Anyway, after that old chestnut, it was time to get to work, because no matter how many I killed or how many got disappeared, there was always more, even when it looked like there wasn't. So after running through my immense stores of 45 magazines and of course beating off sprinters and utilizing my infamous little fence trap, I would of course run down the Zeds with my vehicles, and even hotwire a semi-truck to do more of the same. But my objective for the day was to get into the northern entrance of the mall, which was the restaurant area of the mall. But the sound of my speed demon reverse engine revving would collect a horde so vast that I'd have to call off trying to get into the mall for the day. And instead I would loot the little Zippy Mart attached to the Knox Bank and the bakery. And then I would visit the now defunct Woodland Base for a fresh resupply. It's really a shame, but the Woodland Base is just so riddled with so many corpses that living there has become too much of a burden. At this point in the playthrough, depression was really kicking my ass. Anyway, on the 25th, I continued penetrating the mall, and I had the bright idea of looting this double holster from a Zed I had killed the day before so that I could use 2 handguns since I was flush with handgun ammo but out of long gun ammo. Then in the process of doing that, the bull jankery would strike. Bandits whose existence was unknown to me would stalk and lurk in the shelter of the shadows, somehow peacefully coexisting with the Zeds, would suddenly shoot me from the darkness, and of course, once again target my feet. I was stricken instantly with a nasty limp, as has become the tradition, and then the permutations about how to survive the situation would immediately begin to swarm my alcohol-fogged mind. At first I thought I would limp through the back hallways and burst down a wall with the sledgehammer and limp to the safety of my vehicle. A vehicle is, after all, the only truly safe place in all of a week 1 run. But as phase 1 came to completion when I entered a side hall and was able to treat myself, I was surprised in a doorway by a charging bandit. Assuming incorrectly that he was the last of his cadre, I was once again lodged with a fresh bullet, now in the thigh. They were working themselves from the ground up. My groin was next on the chopping block. Not good, but I had an ace down my pants, or up my sleeve rather, an exploit, and desperate times call for desperate measures. And all the bull jankery on the table, this was no time to honor the rules of engagement. Gerardo Coleman would do anything to survive, and he did, using the run while reloading mod to cancel the limp and to move at speed. Doing this, I was able to get distance between me and the shooters, but more importantly, the Zeds who were now collaborating with them. And with my limp and the unsilenced firepower I had, the truth is, I probably wouldn't have been able to get to the safety of my vehicle before getting overwhelmed by Zeds, not without the exploit. So shamelessly, ruthlessly, Gerardo Coleman exploited, and we blamed the unstable nature of Build 42 and mods and their imperfect collaboration for the entire situation, and we washed our hands of it, living on to fight another day.
Get out of the vehicle!
Back at base, we licked our wounds and used the downtime to finally finish off the sky moat. Muscle strain be damned, we were already hurting. Anyway, the rest of the day passed as you probably imagine, reading and resting, eating and healing. Now, since we were injured, we decided we might as well head back up to the quarantine zone, which, as we'll demonstrate here, is not the bastion of safe living it once was. And as a wise man multiple times has said,
We have assholes.
anyway, after dealing with them, we passed the time watching TV, reading books, and catching fish. But that reminds me of my original purpose in coming back to the quarantine zone this time. My precious Colt Commando, which I had been relying on the last several months, finally broke, and I needed to replace it with a fresh M16. So after getting that done and transferring all the attachments between the guns, I decided I had enough time to head back to the movie theater, so I did. Then the next day, my limp was gone, and it was time once again to put my boot on the necks of my enemies,
He's got set aggro.
and to root out the assholes lurking inside the inner dark of the mall.
Stop, you motherfucker.
There really can be no peace between us. Zed, human,
Don't get up.
we might as well all be the same at this point.
Fucking bitch.
Anyway, the dive into the mall would be cut short by the overwhelming stench of the dead corpses. So I headed back to base early. There I would receive confirmation of the wisdom in the construction of the sky moat. More primitive wizard bandits magically appeared on the roof, but they had done so on the far side of the moat, so they were stuck. But all things being equal, I took mercy on them and provided a way out. All's well that ends well, I guess. Now on to the 28th, when I breached the mall further and got into the restaurant quarter, where disappointment would compound and aggregate.
This could be the stupidest, maybe the stupidest thing I've ever done.
I was hoping at a minimum to at least acquire several bottles of ketchup, which if consumed raw did cause depression, but at the same time did wonders for weight management. But in truth, the restaurants were as barren as the Mojave Desert, and as we prepared to move south in the mall, seeking out the Sears store, banditos arrived on the scene and forced us out. So instead we worked outside with a helicopter overhead and a pilot who apparently decided nothing of interest was happening here, as he left pretty quickly, just in time for another set of bloodthirsty bandits to show up on the scene trying to pop a cap in my ass. But after putting the kibosh on them and doing some boring stuff at base, I decided to waste my time the following day by bringing a generator to the mall, which helped me with exactly nothing at all. Then I did make it into the Sears area finally, and the general darkness and scuffedness of this entire venture almost got me killed, once again, except my armor held up. Then after that, I struggled to get up the escalator some more and called it a day. Now on the 30th, I woke up to another collaboration between a Mad Max night and a Zed, which happened to collapse near the finish line. Unluckily for the knight, he was left with a sword in a rifle fight. But my morning routine being completed, it was time to investigate the nuclear status of West Point. There, of course, I would once again learn the truth. West Point, at least what I saw of it, remained intact. It wasn't nuked. In fact, a few wily soldiers continued to maintain the blockades, but as I arrived on scene, they were evidently falling beneath the combined weight of the zomboid masses.
Get out of there.
And I thought to myself, if I was ever to make my way south, I'd probably want to find a way to bypass West Point altogether, like by taking the railroad tracks. But that's a story for another time. For now, we'll just say that the nukes with the updated mod had seemed to miss both the main of Louisville and West Point. Anyway, back at the mall where I was dotting my T's and crossing my I's, I would bear witness to this funny and satisfying scene.
Oh my god, him screaming, "Get off me," that was awesome. Ugh.
But as it was getting late and dark, it was time to return to base once again, where I would finally get some running water. Wow, we're actually becoming civilized.
Don't at me.
Now, despite the relative safety I had achieved at the movie theater, at least on the upper stories, the place still had its security issues. But even so, I should count my blessings after surviving yet another Zed Bandit collaboration. Anyway, on the first I would continue to fight into the mall and its second story, and continue to struggle with depression and corpse stink, and of course get stalked by the mall bandits who were, once again, intermingling with the Zeds, resulting in this horror movie moment. But as October became November, and the mall continued to disappoint while simultaneously managing to be really effing dangerous, I was beginning to get fed up with the place. Especially now that I saw the loot was pretty scarce there, and then there were all these many bandit surprises in the dark, and even a wandering zombie surprise waiting for me at the bottom of this previously cleared escalator. Let's just say that in that moment, I was ready to swear this place off. Even if I hadn't completely scoured every source of loot within.
How is there so many down here?
The place was just proving to be too dangerous and too unrewarding, and it had already almost cost me my life too many times to count.
Bro, the fuck? Holy shit. I thought the
How are you
mall was
all down
clear,
here?
then I go back downstairs to an area that's been cleared for like days, and it's just full of zombies. That area was completely clear for like days, and now it's full of zombies.
So for the second, it was time to take a chill homie vibes day and rip up some undies and some socks, and to foster some neck strain working on my tailoring, and of course reading literature, and to begin planning a new sort of mission elsewhere. So on the 3rd, I got ready to leave the movie theater base and headed back north, stopping by the fabled Woodland Base for a last resupply. Then I took the Camaro along the now familiar roads between the mall and the quarantine zone, where of course some action was waiting for me. And of course 2 rifles suck at range for some reason, so I'd blow a bit of ammo dealing with that, but afterwards I headed up north towards the LSU library. Now, this was to be a stealth mission, and the Okano Rooms Motel was to be my forward operating base. I spent my first evening there getting a feel for the path I'd have to travel and the positioning of the Zeds. After the bloodbath that was the Crossroads Mall, I wanted to try a different strategy. What I found was that I would be able to get close to the target without having to kill too many Zeds, but what I wasn't counting on was just how complicated things would get for a stealth mission if and when bandits decided to rain on my parade. Anyway, on my way home, I found a gray spliffo laying in the grass, and because it was night or something, he didn't seem to mind letting me walk right up to him. So I did, and then I took him home. And it was kind of funny sleeping with him in the room because he had a pretty deep growl, and I passed the night listening to his rather ominous animal sounds. And in hindsight, doing this might have been unlucky. Anyway, then I got up early the next day and dove into my new stealth mission. Now, it was kind of a long way to go by foot, so I took the Camaro about as close as I dared, taking care to attract as little attention to myself as I could. And then we began working our way up the neighborhood. We would, of course, get some attention, but it was nothing overwhelming. And then, seeing as there was quite the crowd at the library itself, we decided we might as well try to create a diversion. Unfortunately, the firecrackers I had seemed to be duds, and the only diversion I succeeded in creating really was just running through the street, which is to say, no diversion at all. The purpose of a diversion is to have Zeds not follow you. Nonetheless, I was still able to shake the Zeds that followed me, and eventually I cleared enough of them to get close to the library. I would actually even get inside, but things were still a little bit hot for my liking, so I retreated back to the streets, where the persistence of the Zeds was beginning to break through the neighborhood fences, which required me to retreat even further away from the target. And then as I dealt with a group of Zeds who had gathered around the Camaro, a group of about a dozen Mad Max Bandits attempted to run me down. The one good thing about them, besides their immaculate drip, is that they don't carry firearms, so I was able to gun them down relatively easily. But one or two of them would limp off and cause me problems later on. And now, thanks to their interference, I had more undesired attention from the Zeds. But I played it cool and I walked it off. I reloaded my weapons and I picked off the Zeds as they followed. I even managed to catch a rest on the lazy boy inside a home here. Then, a second group of Mad Max witches and wizards came after me. And that's when things got really real. And now there was plenty of unwanted Zed aggro. To make matters worse, the remaining bandits from the initial skirmish were now running around, gathering up large hordes and running them at me. So, in response, I did a little loop-de-loop through the broken fences and started thinking I should make a break for the Camaro. And then, that's when it happened. I came out onto the street and I saw a large horde, and as I scanned the area, there was a clever sprinter embedded among them, pretending to be a walker. And as I turned away, he closed the gap and he bit me on my stupid hand, piercing through my steel reinforced leather gloves. Now, just because the fatal blow had been struck, it did not mean that I wanted to die in this crap hole of the Louisville neighborhood. So I made that final attempt to get to the Camaro, and I got out of there. Now, my only regret really is that I did not have the ability to cut off my hand in order to save my life. I've always wanted to sever an infected limb, but this is build 42 and we don't have the technology yet. Anyway, the infection came on fast, but it was still a day ending in Y. So even as I was succumbing to the virus, there was still bandits to be killed. And after killing them, I hardly had time to even begin to set my affairs in order before the virus started to overtake me. And as I prepared to end things in my own way, the virus beat me to the punch. And thus ended Gerardo Coleman's, aka Antlers, reign of terror on the mean streets of Kentucky. He is survived by absolutely no one, and very few will ever know of his exploits, except for maybe those of you watching this. But he lived for a time, and he did his part to stem the tide of the zombie apocalypse. And someday one would hope that another world-weary traveler will find his horns of power and take on the task of liberating Louisville from its Zed occupants. But now that the story is told, it's time for me to get out of here, Before I do, I want to give a shout out to my channel members. Thank you, Santiago Flo, Gamer Okami, Tyler Jump for Bacon Baconson, and Serena Morgan. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. And actually, there is still one more thing.